Marcus Richardson stepped out of his black Bentley and took a deep breath of the familiar air. After 3 years of building his business empire in Dubai, he was finally home. The massive iron gates of his Beverly Hills mansion closed behind him with a soft clang that echoed through the afternoon silence. He had built this empire from nothing, turning a small tech startup into a billion-dollar corporation that now spanned 3 continents. The Mediterranean-style mansion stood exactly as he remembered it, with its cream-colored walls and red tile roof gleaming in the California sunshine. Palm trees swayed gently in the manicured gardens, and the sound of water caught his attention. It was coming from the back of the house, from the direction of the swimming pool. Marcus frowned. He had specifically instructed his property management company to keep the house empty during his absence. No one should be using his pool. His daughter Emma was supposed to be at her boarding school in Switzerland, and he had dismissed all the household staff before leaving for Dubai. The property managers only came by once a week to check on things. Rolling his leather suitcase behind him, Marcus walked through the marble foyer of his home. Everything looked pristine and well-maintained. The crystal chandelier sparkled above him, and his expensive artwork hung undisturbed on the walls. But the sound of splashing water and laughter grew louder as he approached the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the backyard. What he saw through those windows stopped him in his tracks. A young black woman in a simple blue swimsuit was floating on her back in his pool, her arms spread wide as she gazed up at the sky. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she moved through the water with the grace of someone completely comfortable in her surroundings. But that wasn't what shocked Marcus the most. Swimming beside her was a teenage girl with blonde hair and blue eyes that Marcus recognized immediately. It was his daughter Emma, but she looked different. Taller, more mature, with a genuine smile on her face that he hadn't seen in years. She was laughing at something the woman had said, her voice carrying clearly through the glass. Marcus stood frozen, his mind racing. Emma was supposed to be at La Rosie, the exclusive Swiss boarding school where he paid $50,000 a year for her education. What was she doing here? And who was this woman in his pool acting like she belonged there? His first instinct was anger. Someone had clearly taken advantage of his absence. This woman, whoever she was, had somehow gained access to his property and was now treating it like her own personal resort. Even worse, she had somehow involved his daughter in this unauthorized use of his home. Marcus strode toward the back door, his expensive Italian shoes clicking sharply against the marble floor. He had built his fortune by making quick decisions and taking control of situations, and this was exactly the kind of problem that required immediate action. He pushed open the sliding glass door, and both swimmers looked up at the sound. The woman's face registered surprise, but not the panic or guilt he expected to see. Instead, she simply treaded water and watched him approach with calm, intelligent eyes. Emma's reaction was completely different. Her face lit up with genuine joy, and she immediately began swimming toward the edge of the pool. "Dad!" she called out, her voice filled with excitement. "You're home early. I wasn't expecting you until next week." Marcus stopped at the edge of the pool, looking down at his daughter. She looked healthy and happy, more vibrant than he remembered. But his attention kept drifting to the woman who was now swimming leisurely toward the shallow end. "Emma? What are you doing here?" Marcus asked, his voice tight with confusion. "You should be in Switzerland." "I finished my semester early," Emma said, pulling herself up to sit on the pool's edge. "I got permission to come home for an extended break. Didn't you get my emails?" Marcus realized he hadn't checked his personal email in weeks. He had been so focused on closing the Dubai deal that everything else had taken a back seat. But that still didn't explain the stranger in his pool. The woman had reached the shallow end and was standing in waist-deep water. She was probably in her late 20s, with smooth, dark skin and the kind of natural beauty that didn't need makeup to shine. She moved with quiet dignity as she walked up the pool steps, water dripping from her modest swimsuit. "And who is this?" Marcus asked, his business voice taking over. It was the same tone he used in boardrooms when he needed to establish control. Emma jumped up from the pool edge, water streaming from her swimsuit. "Dad, this is Grace. She's amazing. She's been taking care of me since I got back from school." Grace reached for a towel from a nearby chair and wrapped it around herself with practiced efficiency. She met Marcus's gaze directly, showing no signs of intimidation despite his obvious displeasure. "Mr. Richardson," Grace said, extending her hand. "I'm Grace Williams. I apologize for the surprise. I had no idea you were returning today." Marcus looked at the offered hand but didn't take it. "Ms. Williams, I'm not sure how you gained access to my property, but I'm going to need you to explain yourself immediately." Emma stepped between them, her wet hair dripping onto the warm concrete. "Dad, don't be rude. Grace isn't some stranger. She works for you." "I most certainly do not employ anyone by that name," Marcus said firmly. "I dismissed all household staff before I left for Dubai." Grace spoke up, her voice calm and professional. "Actually, sir, you do employ me. I was hired by your property management company 6 months ago. There was an incident with your daughter, and they determined she needed supervision when she was home from school." Marcus felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. "What kind of incident?" Emma's face flushed, and she looked down at her feet. "Dad, it wasn't a big deal. I got into some trouble at a party here in Beverly Hills. The neighbors called the police about noise, and when they came, they found that I had been drinking. The property management company said I couldn't stay here alone anymore." "You were drinking?" Marcus's voice rose. "Emma, you're only 17. I know, Emma said quickly. "It was stupid. But Grace helped me understand that. She's not just a babysitter, Dad. She's been teaching me things, real things, about responsibility and making good choices." Marcus looked back at Grace, who was now sitting in one of the poolside chairs, still wrapped in her towel. She didn't look like any housekeeper or nanny he had ever employed. There was something about her bearing, her education evident in the way she spoke, that suggested she was overqualified for such a position. "What exactly are your qualifications, Ms. Williams?" Marcus asked. "I have a master's degree in social work from UCLA, Grace replied. "I specialized in adolescent development and family dynamics. I also have experience working with high-risk youth from various socioeconomic backgrounds." Marcus was taken aback. This was not what he had expected. Most of his previous household staff had basic education and simple responsibilities. This woman was clearly educated and professional. "The property management company hired you to—" "What exactly?" "To provide supervision and guidance for Emma when she's home from school," Grace explained. "To ensure she's safe, making good decisions, and has adult support when needed. They were very specific that this was a temporary arrangement until you returned." Emma sat down in the chair next to Grace, still dripping from the pool. "Dad, Grace has been incredible. She doesn't treat me like a child, but she also doesn't let me get away with stupid stuff. She's been teaching me to cook, helping me understand my finances, even showing me how to do my own laundry properly." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You don't know how to do laundry?" "I do now," Emma said with a smile. "Grace taught me that just because we have money doesn't mean I shouldn't know how to take care of myself. She says independence comes from knowledge, not from having people do everything for you." Despite his initial anger, Marcus found himself curious about this woman's philosophy. He had always provided Emma with every luxury, assuming that was what a good father should do. The idea that she might benefit from learning basic life skills had never occurred to him. "Where are you staying, Ms. Williams?" Marcus asked. "In the guest house," Grace replied. "The property management company thought it would be best for me to be on site, given Emma's age and the size of this property." Marcus nodded slowly. The guest house was a small but comfortable two-bedroom structure near the back of his property. It was designed for visiting staff or relatives who needed extended stays. "Dad," Emma said, moving to the edge of her chair, "Grace is different from anyone else you've ever hired. She actually cares about what happens to me. Not just about keeping me out of trouble, but about helping me become a better person." Marcus looked at his daughter's face and saw something he hadn't seen in years: respect for an adult authority figure. Emma had always been polite to her teachers and the household staff, but it was the kind of distant politeness that came from good breeding, not genuine connection. "What have you two been doing while I was gone?" Marcus asked, his tone softer now. Emma's face lit up. "Grace has been teaching me so much. We've been volunteering at a community center downtown twice a week. I help kids with their homework, and Grace runs a support group for teenagers. At first, I thought it would be boring, but it's actually amazing." Marcus felt a jolt of surprise. Emma had never shown interest in volunteer work or helping others. Her previous activities had centered around shopping, spa visits, and social events with other wealthy teenagers. "She also taught me about budgeting," Emma continued. "I know it sounds weird since we have so much money, but Grace showed me how to track spending and understand the value of things. Did you know I was spending almost $3,000 a month just on clothes I barely wore?" Marcus hadn't known that, but it didn't surprise him. He had always given Emma unlimited access to credit cards, assuming that money wasn't something she needed to worry about. Grace spoke up. "Emma is very intelligent, Mr. Richardson. She just needed someone to challenge her in the right ways. She's been learning about social responsibility, personal accountability, and how to use her privileges to make a positive impact." "I started a fundraiser at my school," Emma added eagerly. "We raised $15,000 to build a clean water well in Kenya. Grace helped me research the organization and make sure the money would actually help people." Marcus sat down in one of the poolside chairs, feeling overwhelmed by these revelations. This was not the daughter he remembered leaving 3 years ago. That Emma had been pleasant but shallow, interested mainly in material things and social status. This Emma seemed engaged with the world in a way he had never seen before. "The swimming," Marcus said suddenly, looking at the pool. "You were both swimming when I arrived." Grace smiled for the first time since he had appeared. "Emma was telling me about a boy she likes at school. We often have our best conversations in the pool. There's something about being in the water that makes it easier to talk about difficult topics." "A boy?" Marcus felt his paternal instincts kick in. "What boy?" Emma laughed. "His name is David, and he's very nice. Grace already gave him the protective guardian speech when he video called me last week." Marcus looked at Grace with new interest. "You spoke to this boy?" "I did," Grace confirmed. "Emma asked me to meet him virtually, and I thought it was a reasonable request. He seems like a respectful young man from a good family. They want to go to dinner when Emma returns to school, and I told them that would be fine as long as they stay in public places and Emma checks in regularly." Marcus realized that Grace had somehow managed to balance being protective with being reasonable. This was a delicate line that he had never learned to walk with Emma. "Mr. Richardson," Grace said, standing up from her chair, "I know this is a lot to process. You weren't expecting to find anyone here, let alone someone swimming in your pool with your daughter. But I want you to know that everything I've done has been in Emma's best interest and with the full knowledge of the property management company." Marcus looked at his daughter, who was watching him anxiously. He could see that Grace's opinion mattered to Emma, and that his reaction to Grace would affect his relationship with his daughter. "How long were you planning to stay?" Marcus asked Grace. "The property management company told me to stay until you returned and could make your own arrangements," Grace replied. "I'm happy to pack my things and leave today if that's what you prefer." Emma's face fell. "Dad, please don't make her leave. Grace has helped me more in 6 months than any teacher or counselor ever has." She understands me. Marcus looked at his daughter's pleading expression and felt a stab of guilt. Had he been so absent from Emma's life that a stranger could understand her better than he did? The thought was painful, but he couldn't deny what he was seeing. "I'd like to talk with Ms. Williams privately," Marcus said to Emma. "Why don't you go inside and get changed? We can discuss this further over dinner." Emma stood up, her face anxious. "You're not going to fire her, are you?" "I'm not going to make any decisions without understanding the full situation," Marcus replied diplomatically. After Emma went inside, Marcus and Grace sat in silence for a moment. The late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the pool area, and the sound of traffic from the distant streets created a subtle background hum. "Ms. Williams," Marcus began, "I'm going to be honest with you. This is not what I expected to come home to." "I understand," Grace replied. "If I were in your position, I would probably feel the same way. My daughter seems very attached to you." "We've developed a good working relationship," Grace said carefully. "Emma is a wonderful young woman who just needed some guidance and structure." "And you think I haven't provided that?" Grace was quiet for a long moment, choosing her words carefully. "Mr. Richardson, I think you've provided Emma with many opportunities and advantages, but there's a difference between providing for someone and being present with them." The words hit Marcus harder than he expected. He had always told himself that working hard to provide for Emma was the same as being a good father. But looking at the changes in his daughter, he was beginning to wonder if he had been wrong. As the sun continued to set, Marcus realized that his homecoming was going to be far more complicated than he had anticipated. The dinner conversation that evening was unlike any Marcus Richardson had experienced in his own home. Instead of the usual quiet meals with Emma picking at expensive catered food while checking her phone, the dining room was filled with animated discussion and genuine laughter. Grace had prepared the meal herself, a simple but delicious chicken and vegetable dish that Emma had helped cook. Marcus watched in amazement as his daughter confidently discussed the spices they had used and explained how Grace had taught her to properly season food. "I never realized cooking could be so relaxing," Emma said, passing her father a bowl of fresh salad. "Grace says it's like meditation, but with more practical results." Marcus tasted the food and was surprised by how much better it was than most of the catered meals he usually arranged for his rare dinners at home. There was something warm and personal about eating food that had been prepared with care rather than simply purchased. "This is excellent," he said, looking at Grace. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My grandmother," Grace replied with a soft smile. "She raised me after my parents died when I was 12. She always said that knowing how to feed yourself and others was one of life's most important skills." Marcus felt a twinge of curiosity about Grace's background, but before he could ask more, Emma jumped into the conversation. "Grace lost her parents in a car accident," Emma explained. "But instead of feeling sorry for herself, she used that experience to help other people. That's why she became a social worker." Marcus looked at Grace with new understanding. No wonder she seemed to connect so well with Emma. She had experienced real loss and hardship, something that Emma had been shielded from her entire life. "I'm sorry for your loss," Marcus said sincerely. "Thank you," Grace replied. "It was a long time ago, but it taught me that family isn't always about blood relations. Sometimes the people who care for you most are the ones who choose to be in your life." Emma nodded enthusiastically. "That's exactly what Grace taught me about friendship, too. She helped me understand that real friends care about who you are as a person, not how much money your family has." Marcus set down his fork, suddenly concerned. "Have you been having problems with friends?" Emma and Grace exchanged a glance, and Marcus could see there was more to the story than he had heard earlier. "Dad," Emma said slowly, "there's some stuff I need to tell you about what happened while you were gone. It's more than just that one party where I got in trouble." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He had built his business empire by always being prepared for problems, but he realized he had no idea what problems his own daughter might have been facing. "I'm listening," he said. Emma took a deep breath. "The party where the police came wasn't the first time I had been drinking. I had been going to parties almost every weekend since you left. The people I thought were my friends were really just using me because I could pay for everything and because this house was empty." Marcus felt a cold wave of guilt wash over him. He had left Emma with access to credit cards and an empty mansion, never considering that she might be vulnerable to people who would take advantage of her. "These friends," Marcus said carefully, "were they from school?" "Some were," Emma replied, "but most were older kids from Beverly Hills. They would text me whenever they wanted to party, and I thought that meant they liked me. Grace helped me understand that they were just using me." Grace spoke up gently. "When I first arrived, Emma was spending time with a group that wasn't looking out for her best interests. They were encouraging her to take risks and make choices that could have had serious consequences." "What kind of consequences?" Marcus asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. Emma looked down at her plate. "The night the police came, I wasn't just drinking beer. Someone brought harder stuff, and I tried it. I don't really remember much after that, which is how I know it was too much." Marcus felt like he had been punched in the chest. His 17-year-old daughter could have been seriously hurt, and he had been halfway around the world, completely unaware. "The property management company called me the next day," Grace continued. "They explained the situation and asked if I could take on an emergency placement. Emma was going to be sent back to boarding school immediately, but they were concerned about her making similar choices there without proper support. So you saved me from getting kicked out of La Rosie," Emma said to Grace gratefully. "If I had gotten expelled, I would have had to start over at a new school, and my college applications would have been ruined." Marcus realized that Grace hadn't just been hired as a babysitter. She had been brought in to prevent his daughter's life from completely derailing. "What exactly did you do to help?" Marcus asked Grace. "First, I helped Emma understand why she was making these choices," Grace explained. "She was feeling lonely and abandoned, and she was using parties and risky behavior to get attention and feel connected to other people. I was angry at you for leaving," Emma said quietly to her father. "I know your business is important, but it felt like you chose Dubai over me. The parties made me feel like people wanted to be around me." Marcus felt his throat tighten. He had never realized that his work abroad had felt like abandonment to Emma. In his mind, he had been working hard to secure her future, but she had experienced it as rejection. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "I thought I was doing the right thing for both of us." "I know that now," Emma replied. "Grace helped me understand that you weren't trying to hurt me. She explained that sometimes adults make decisions that seem wrong to kids, but they're coming from a place of love." Marcus looked at Grace with growing respect. She had somehow managed to repair damage to his relationship with Emma without him even being present. "After we worked through Emma's feelings about the situation," Grace continued, "we focused on helping her build genuine friendships and find meaningful activities. That's when we started volunteering at the community center." "The kids there are amazing," Emma said, her face lighting up. "They have so little compared to what I've always had, but they're grateful for everything. Working with them made me realize how much I had been taking for granted." Marcus tried to imagine his daughter, who had never wanted for anything, working with underprivileged children. The picture didn't match his understanding of who Emma was. "What kind of work do you do there?" he asked. "I help kids with homework and reading," Emma explained. "Some of them are behind in school because they move around a lot or because their parents work multiple jobs and can't help them at home. At first, I felt stupid because I didn't know how to explain things simply enough. Grace had to teach me how to communicate better." "Emma discovered she has a gift for working with younger children," Grace added. She's patient and creative, and she doesn't give up when someone is struggling to understand something." Marcus was amazed. He had never seen Emma display patience with anything, let alone struggling children. "One of the kids I work with is named Miguel," Emma continued. "He's 8, and when I first met him, he hated reading because he thought he was dumb. But Grace taught me some techniques to make reading fun, and now Miguel actually asks for extra books to take home." "That's incredible," Marcus said, and he meant it. He was seeing a side of his daughter that he never knew existed. "Grace also helped me understand money differently," Emma said. "Not just how to budget my own spending, but how money can be used to actually help people instead of just buying things." "What do you mean?" Grace smiled. Emma started researching the cost of basic necessities for the families at the community center. She discovered that many of the children were struggling with simple things like having enough school supplies or warm clothes for winter. "So I started a program," Emma said excitedly. "Instead of buying designer clothes I didn't really need, I calculated how much I was spending and used that money to buy supplies for the kids. Do you know that what I used to spend on one handbag could buy a whole year's worth of school supplies for 3 children?" Marcus was genuinely shocked. This level of social consciousness was completely new for Emma, and it showed a maturity he hadn't expected from her. "Grace taught me that having money is a responsibility, not just a privilege," Emma continued. "She helped me understand that when you're lucky enough to have resources, you should think about how to use them to make other people's lives better." Marcus looked at Grace, who had been quietly eating her dinner while Emma talked. "This is quite a transformation you've facilitated." "Emma did the work herself," Grace replied. "I just provided some structure and perspective. She was ready to grow. She just needed the right environment." "But how did you know what approach to take?" Marcus asked. "Your methods seem very different from traditional tutoring or discipline." Grace set down her fork and considered her answer carefully. "Mr. Richardson, I've worked with many teenagers from wealthy families. Often their acting out stems from feeling disconnected from their parents and from any sense of real purpose. They have every material advantage, but they lack emotional security and meaningful challenges." "Emma wasn't a bad kid," Grace continued. "She was a lonely kid who was making poor choices because she didn't have better options. Once we gave her opportunities to connect with you emotionally and to make a real difference in other people's lives, her whole perspective changed." Marcus realized that Grace had identified problems in his parenting approach that he hadn't even known existed. He had always focused on providing Emma with opportunities and advantages, but he had never considered her emotional needs or her desire to feel useful and important. "The swimming," Marcus said suddenly, remembering how comfortable Emma and Grace had looked together in the pool. "How did that become part of your routine?" Emma grinned. "Grace taught me that physical activity helps clear your mind and makes it easier to talk about difficult stuff. We swim almost every day, and some of our best conversations happen in the water." "It's a neutral space," Grace explained. "There's something about being in water that equalizes people. It doesn't matter how much money you have or what designer clothes you own when you're swimming in a pool. It helped Emma and me build a relationship based on who we really are as people." Marcus thought about his own relationship with Emma and realized they had never had a shared activity where they could just be themselves. Their interactions had always been formal, either over expensive dinners or during brief conversations about school or money. "Grace also taught me about different kinds of intelligence," Emma said. "I always thought I wasn't very smart because I struggled with some subjects at school, but Grace helped me understand that intelligence comes in many forms." "Emma has exceptional emotional intelligence," Grace said. "She's naturally empathetic and intuitive about other people's feelings. Those are valuable skills that don't always show up on academic tests." Marcus felt another pang of guilt. He had always focused on Emma's grades and test scores, never considering that there might be other forms of intelligence that were equally valuable. "Dad," Emma said hesitantly, There's something else I need to tell you. Marcus braced himself for another revelation. I don't want to go back to La Rosie next semester. What? Marcus was genuinely surprised. La Rosie was one of the most prestigious schools in the world, and he had worked hard to get Emma accepted there. I want to finish high school here in California, Emma explained. Grace helped me research some excellent public schools that have strong community service programs. I want to continue working with kids like Miguel, and I want to be closer to home. Closer to home, Marcus repeated. Closer to you, Emma clarified. Grace helped me understand that our relationship is important, and that it's hard to maintain a connection when I'm thousands of miles away. I want to spend more time with you before I leave for college. Marcus felt his eyes grow misty. He had sent Emma to boarding school thinking he was giving her the best education money could buy. He had never considered that she might prefer to be near her family. Are you sure about this? He asked. La Rosie has connections that could help with college admissions. I've already been accepted early admission to UCLA, Emma said proudly. Grace helped me prepare my application essay about my volunteer work, and the admissions committee was really impressed with my community service. Marcus was stunned. UCLA? When did you apply? And early admission? Grace encouraged me to apply to schools that aligned with my interests in social work and community development, Emma explained. UCLA has an amazing program that combines business education with social responsibility. I could learn how to use business skills to solve social problems. Marcus looked at Grace, who had somehow helped his daughter develop clear career goals and gain admission to a prestigious university without him even knowing she was applying. I thought you might want to study business and take over part of my company someday, Marcus said. I do want to study business, Emma replied, but I want to use those skills to help people, not just to make money. Grace taught me that success isn't just about how much wealth you accumulate, but about how much good you do in the world. As dinner continued, Marcus found himself reevaluating everything he thought he knew about parenting and success. Grace had somehow taken his troubled, directionless daughter and helped her become a young woman with clear values, meaningful goals, and genuine compassion for others. More importantly, Grace had helped Emma maintain love and respect for her father while developing independence and confidence. Marcus realized that this was exactly the kind of person he had hoped Emma would become, but he had never known how to guide her in that direction. As they cleared the dinner dishes together, Marcus watched Emma and Grace work as a team, chatting and laughing while they cleaned the kitchen. There was an easy comfort between them that spoke of many shared meals and conversations. For the first time since returning home, Marcus began to wonder if his original plan to dismiss Grace immediately might be a mistake. His daughter had clearly thrived under Grace's guidance, and Emma's happiness and growth seemed directly connected to Grace's presence in her life. But Marcus also felt a complex mix of gratitude and inadequacy. Grace had succeeded where he had failed, and that realization was both humbling and somewhat threatening to his identity as Emma's father. Marcus Richardson spent most of that night staring at the ceiling of his master bedroom, his mind racing with everything he had learned about his daughter and the woman who had transformed her life. The house felt different now that he knew Emma and Grace had been living there, filling it with genuine warmth and purpose instead of the expensive emptiness he remembered. Around midnight, he got up and walked to his home office, intending to review some business documents to clear his mind. But as he passed the large window overlooking the backyard, he saw a light on in the guest house where Grace was staying. She was probably packing her belongings, assuming she would be dismissed in the morning. The thought bothered him more than he expected. The next morning, Marcus woke early and made coffee in his kitchen, something he rarely did since he usually relied on household staff or grabbed coffee on his way to business meetings. As he waited for the coffee to brew, he heard voices coming from the pool area. Looking outside, he saw Emma and Grace sitting at the poolside table, sharing breakfast and what appeared to be an intense conversation. Emma's body language suggested she was upset, and Grace was leaning forward in the supportive posture of someone offering comfort. Marcus stepped outside, and both women looked up at his approach. "Good morning," he said, trying to gauge the mood. "Morning, Dad," Emma replied, but her usual enthusiasm was noticeably absent. Grace stood up from her chair. "Good morning, Mr. Richardson. I was just telling Emma that I'll be packed and ready to leave by noon, as we discussed." "We didn't exactly discuss that," Marcus corrected gently. "We said we would talk further today." Emma's eyes filled with hope. "Does that mean you might let Grace stay?" Marcus sat down in the empty chair at their table. "That's what I want to discuss, but first I have some questions for both of you." Grace sat back down, her expression attentive but cautious. "Grace," Marcus began, "yesterday you mentioned that you have a master's degree in social work from UCLA. You're clearly overqualified to be a live-in supervisor for a teenager. Why did you take this job?" Grace was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "The truth is, Mr. Richardson, I was between positions. I had been working at a group home for at-risk youth, but the program lost funding and had to close. The property management company offered me this temporary position, and I needed the work." "But it's more than that," Emma interjected. "Tell him about your dreams, Grace." Grace looked slightly embarrassed. "It's not really relevant to the current situation." "Yes, it is," Emma insisted. "Dad, Grace wants to open her own program someday. A place where kids from different backgrounds can come together and learn from each other. Rich kids, poor kids, kids who've had problems, kids who've had advantages. She thinks everyone has something valuable to contribute." Marcus looked at Grace with renewed interest. "Tell me about this program." "It's just an idea," Grace said modestly. "I've seen how much young people can grow when they're given meaningful challenges and opportunities to connect with people different from themselves. I'd like to create a space where that can happen intentionally, like what Emma has been experiencing at the community center." "Exactly," Grace said, her voice growing more animated. "Imagine a program where privileged teenagers like Emma could work alongside kids from lower-income families on projects that benefit the whole community. Both groups would learn from each other and develop skills they wouldn't get in traditional settings." Marcus found himself intrigued by the concept. What would prevent this from becoming just another charity project where wealthy kids feel good about helping poor kids? Grace smiled, clearly pleased by the question. "That's exactly the right concern. The key is reciprocity. It can't be about one group helping another. It has to be about everyone contributing their unique strengths toward shared goals." "Grace explained it to me this way," Emma added. "The kids from the community center know about resilience, creativity, and making the most of limited resources. Kids like me know about accessing opportunities, planning for the future, and navigating systems. When you put those skills together, everyone becomes stronger." Marcus was impressed by the thoughtfulness behind Grace's vision. This wasn't idealistic do-gooderism. It was a practical approach to developing young people's potential. "Have you done any concrete planning for this program?" Marcus asked. "I've been researching and writing grant proposals in my spare time," Grace admitted. "I've also been documenting what's worked well with Emma, thinking it might serve as a case study." Emma leaned forward excitedly. "Dad, you should see Grace's notebooks. She's incredibly organized and thorough. She tracks everything: what methods work, what challenges come up, how to measure real progress versus just surface improvements." Marcus realized that Grace had been treating Emma's development as a professional project, carefully documenting her approaches and results. This level of intentionality impressed him. "Grace," Marcus said, "I have a proposition for you." Both women looked at him with surprise. "Instead of leaving today, I'd like you to consider staying on in a different capacity. Not as Emma's supervisor, but as a consultant to help me understand how to be a better father during Emma's final year before college. Grace's eyes widened. Mr. Richardson, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure that's necessary. You and Emma can rebuild your relationship without outside help. Actually, Marcus said, I think I need to be honest about something. Yesterday I was angry about finding you here because I felt like my authority had been undermined. But the truth is, I was also threatened by how well you understand my daughter. You've connected with Emma in ways I never learned how to do. Emma reached over and took her father's hand. Dad, you're not a bad father. You just work differently than Grace does. Maybe, Marcus replied, but I want to learn to work better. Grace, you've shown me that Emma is capable of so much more than I ever imagined. I want to understand how to support that growth instead of just providing for her financially. Grace considered his words carefully. What exactly would this consulting arrangement involve? I want you to teach me what you've learned about Emma, Marcus explained. Help me understand how to have the kinds of conversations you two have. Show me how to be supportive without being controlling. And, Marcus continued, looking directly at Grace, I want to discuss funding your youth program. Grace's mouth fell open. I'm sorry. What? Emma squeezed her father's hand excitedly. Dad, really? I've been looking for meaningful ways to use my wealth for social good, Marcus explained. Most of the charitable organizations I've supported feel impersonal and distant. This would be different. I could see the impact directly, and Emma could be involved in developing the program. Grace shook her head slowly. Mr. Richardson, that's an incredibly generous offer. But I can't accept charity from you. It wouldn't be charity, Marcus clarified. It would be an investment in a program I believe could make a real difference. And Emma could help design the business model to ensure it's financially sustainable. Emma's eyes lit up. Grace, this could be amazing. I could use what I learn at UCLA to help make the program work. We could prove that this kind of cross-cultural youth development actually creates lasting change. Marcus could see that Grace was torn between excitement and caution. Think about it, he said. You don't have to decide today, but consider staying for the next few months while Emma finishes her senior year. Help me learn to be the father she deserves and let me help you develop your program concept. Grace looked at Emma, who was practically vibrating with excitement. There's something else, Marcus added. Emma, you said you want to finish high school here in California? Yes, Emma replied firmly. Then Grace, Emma will need support transitioning to a new school and adjusting to living at home full-time. I travel frequently for business, and I don't want Emma to feel abandoned again. Grace nodded slowly. I can see how that would be helpful. But I also want to be more present, Marcus continued. I want to learn to balance my work responsibilities with being an active father. That's going to require some guidance. Emma looked back and forth between her father and Grace. So, Grace would stay and help both of us? If she's willing, Marcus replied. Grace was quiet for a long moment, clearly thinking through the implications. If I agreed to this arrangement, there would need to be clear boundaries and expectations. I won't stay in a situation where my role is undefined or where I'm walking on eggshells. Absolutely, Marcus agreed. We would formalize everything properly. You would be a family consultant with a clear scope of work and fair compensation. And the youth program funding? Completely separate from your consulting work, Marcus assured her. Whether you stay to help with Emma or not, I'm interested in supporting your program concept. You've demonstrated that your methods work. Grace looked at Emma, who was watching her with obvious hope. Emma, Grace said, how do you feel about this? Having me stay in a different role while you build a relationship with your father? I think it's perfect, Emma replied immediately. I want to get closer to Dad, but I also know I still have a lot to learn from you. And the idea of helping develop your program is like a dream come true. Grace smiled at Emma's enthusiasm, then looked back at Marcus. Mr. Richardson, can I ask you something? Of course. What changed your mind? Yesterday you clearly wanted me gone. Marcus took a deep breath. Honestly, I realized that my ego was getting in the way of what's best for Emma. You've helped her become the kind of person I always hoped she would be. Instead of feeling threatened by that, I should be grateful and try to learn from it. Also, Marcus added with a slight smile, I noticed that Emma calls you Grace, but she still calls me Dad. She respects you as a mentor, but she loves me as her father. There's room in her life for both relationships. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Dad, that's exactly right. Grace was quiet for another moment, then nodded slowly. All right. I'll stay for 6 months while Emma transitions to her new school, and you both adjust to this new arrangement. We can evaluate how things are working and decide whether to continue beyond that. Emma jumped up from her chair and hugged Grace tightly, then turned and hugged her father with equal enthusiasm. This is going to be amazing, she said. Dad, wait until you see Grace's program notes, and Grace, wait until you see Dad's business skills applied to social problems. You two are going to make an incredible team. Over the following weeks, Marcus discovered that learning to be an active father was both harder and more rewarding than building a billion-dollar business. Grace taught him to listen without trying to fix everything, to ask questions instead of giving orders, and to create space for Emma to make her own decisions while providing guidance. Their daily routine evolved into something Marcus had never experienced. He began working from home more often, joining Emma and Grace for their morning swims, and participating in family dinners where they discussed everything from Emma's college plans to Grace's program development. Marcus also started accompanying Emma and Grace to the community center, initially as an observer, but gradually becoming involved in fundraising and organizational development. Working with the children there gave him a new perspective on his own privileges and responsibilities. One evening, about a month after his return, Marcus found himself alone with Grace in his home office, reviewing business plans for her youth program. Grace, he said, looking up from the financial projections, I want you to know that hiring you was the best business decision the property management company ever made on my behalf. Grace smiled. I think they were just trying to prevent a crisis. They had no idea it would turn into this. Neither did I, Marcus admitted, but I'm grateful it did. Emma is happier than I've ever seen her, and I'm finally learning to be the father she deserves. You're a good father, Marcus, Grace said, using his first name for the first time. You just needed to understand that being present is as important as providing. As Marcus looked around his office, which now contained Emma's college applications, Grace's program plans, and photos from their volunteer work at the community center, he realized that his house had finally become a home. The transformation that had begun with finding 2 women swimming in his pool had changed not just his daughter's life, but his own understanding of what it meant to be successful, to be useful, and to be family. 6 months later, Emma graduated as valedictorian from her new public school and was featured in the local newspaper for starting a peer mentoring program. Grace's Youth Development Center received its first major grant and opened with Emma as a founding youth board member. And Marcus learned that the most important deal he had ever closed was the one that kept his family together. The pool, where this unexpected journey had begun, became the site of weekly family meetings, strategy sessions for Grace's program, and countless conversations that strengthened the bonds between 3 people who had discovered that family could be chosen as much as it was born.